So Jalen Milroe has left us, and where does that leave us?
You are Locked On Bama, your daily podcast on the Alabama Crimson Tide, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, everybody, and welcome back into Locked On Bama, AHSA's radio network. Luke Robinson, that's me. Bama Online's Jimmy Stein, that's him. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. I want to thank FanDuel. I want to thank you every day for being here every day. Thank you, newbies, for being here today. All are welcome in our humble abode, virtual humble abode. So, Jimmy, we had some announcements yesterday, not the least of which was Jalen Milroe, who has been the center of controversy. Ironically, he takes snap from a center. He has been much maligned and much beloved at times, but he's leaving us. He's going to the pros, which is something you and I predicted. Thought there'd be no other reason for him to go somewhere else. I mean, there were rumors, but in the end, this is best for everybody. Don't you agree?
Well, I mean, technically, I think it would have been best for Jalen to play another year of college football for his own development. That's what I think. And I think playing for Lincoln Riley would have been a good idea. I don't know whether that would have been available to him or not. But in the end, this is what's his decision. And Alabama's going to be fine. I mean, Alabama's always going to be fine. Alabama recruits good football players. I think this was time to turn the page. I think it was time to turn the page. One thing about Jalen, you got to remember this on top. These kids go to school, and I know we always talk about football and not about school, but Jalen had graduated from Alabama not just with an undergraduate degree, but a master's degree. There's nothing else for him to do academically. He had been a 2-year starter at Alabama. He had won the SEC. Really, it was time for Jalen Milroe to turn the page. He was just sort of done at Alabama, and I think, they read the internet. They read social media, the Milroe, Team Milroe, and I think turning the page is best for everyone. And I'm excited about all three guys. There's only 3 in Alabama's quarterback room. That's one less than is ideal. But I'm legit excited about the upside and potential of all 3 guys, Ty Simpson, Austin Mack, and Keelan Russell, who will be arriving at Alabama Sunday or Monday. And I'm excited about spring and having a real competition to determine the starter. And we'll see what happens.
Yeah. Ironically, Keelan Russell got a little banged up yesterday. I watched him play. I fell in love with him. I didn't know I could love him more, and I already love him as much as I thought I could. Keelan Russell is a beautiful, beautiful quarterback, and I'm very excited about him. And the more I think about it, the more I feel like I should be saying Keelan Russell will be Alabama's starter next year. I'm not there yet because I think that's silly to get into that because we have no idea what he's even going to look like when he steps on the practice field. I do have also probably more faith in Ty Simpson than your average fan. So right now, my answer for next year's quarterback is Ty Simpson with Keelan Russell right behind him with a bullet. And I know there are even some people who are like, hey, Austin Mack is a, gigantor that can come out there and sling it all over the field too. Okay. That's what's going to make it kind of fun. But Keelan Russell did get banged up yesterday in the Under Armour All-American game. It looked a lot worse when it happened than what I think actually happened because he's young. If that happens to Jimmy or me, we evaporate into the ether. And instead, it happens to him, and he sort of bounces up and puts some ice on it. And he could have gone back in, but he didn't want to. I mean, no, it wasn't that he didn't want to. I think it was that he was like, I'm just going to play it safe. And that was the smart play. I also quit watching the Under Armour All-American game at that point because I was like, if I can't see Keelan Russell, I don't want to watch any of it. But, I thought he looked good. So, in the end, I'm fine with this. I know you and I have been staunch defenders of Jalen Milroe at times this year. I would also say this to the Team Milroe, as you put it. Something I've learned in the last several years of doing this podcast, it's just best not to read the comments all the time. I mean, like even on a smaller scale for us, it's better not to read the comments. And we're older and we probably care less about what is said because we are older. But it's still best just not to read the comments all the time. Yeah, you can read them sometimes and you can chirp back occasionally. But for the most part, just the internet is just a big cesspool at times, except for this podcast, which is wonderful.
Yeah, the negativity out there is outrageous. But this is just 2024, I guess. I mean, but the negativity and the rudeness and crudeness is terrible. And I hope they don't read it, but I know that they do. Of course they do. I mean, everybody out there, like, hey, when your kid is accomplishing something and they're talking about him in the quote newspaper, you not only buy the newspaper and read it, you buy 20 copies and send it to your friends and family. I mean, nothing changes because these guys are on a bigger stage. Of course they read it. And it's so unfortunate how impolite people can be. But that being said, what my hope is that we're sort of, like I said, turning the page and 2024 is behind us. That season, it didn't go well. We all have our own criticisms. I've got my own and have shared them here. Again, I think it was a disappointing season. I think that's on DeBoer and his staff. And again, there's a transition here, and I'm fine with. Hey, I'm optimistic about Kalen DeBoer at Alabama and the staff. I'm optimistic about now. I'm ready to see what it's going to look like when it's more his program. I do think this isn't an excuse. It's just an observation. I'm going to talk about this some today and something I'm going to write. It really felt like Kalen DeBoer coaching Nick Saban's football team this past year. I mean, most of those kids were recruited by Nick to play in Saban's system. They had chosen to play at Alabama for Nick Saban, and Kalen DeBoer sort of coached Nick's team because Nick left. Next year is Kalen DeBoer's team. And when you're like, oh, a bunch of them on the team committed to Saban. Yes, but they've had ample time to leave. They've all had multiple transfer portal windows to leave. I think everyone that's on the team next fall has chosen to play for Kalen DeBoer at Alabama, even if they were already there. So
that's a good point.
So I think that it's DeBoer's team, and now's the time for DeBoer to really show Kalen DeBoer's team. And again, I said I think people make too much of what I said about this when I said 2024 was about Jalen Milroe and 2025 will be about Kalen DeBoer. What I mean by that is just DeBoer inherited Nick Saban's football team, and Jalen Milroe was the quarterback of that football team. And this is what he inherited. And Milroe was good enough to lift a team on his shoulders and make it all the way to the national championship game. I can prove to you that's true because we saw him do it. He got to at least a semifinal and an overtime game. He was capable of that. He's also capable of losing to teams Alabama shouldn't lose to because he plays poorly. And so that's why I meant that 2024 was on Jalen Milroe. He was good enough to take us all the way, bad enough to get us to 9-4, and that's what happened. So 2025 is about Kalen DeBoer. It's his football team, and it will have his stamp on it. And I'm excited about that. I don't mean it as a sense of foreboding. I mean it in an optimistic sense. I'm excited to see what Kalen DeBoer can do with this when it's his own football team.
In that way, it is like Alabama, the logo is in the center, and you had Jalen Milroe on one side of the tug of war and Jalen Milroe on the other side of the tug of war. And I think for the most part, good Jalen won, but he never actually or was leading, but he never actually won the tug of war battle. Good Jalen didn't. And another way to look at this, and the way you put it made me think about this. You know what this year kind of was? This year was like we lost our starting quarterback in Nick Saban at the beginning of the year, and we bring in our backup who's good, but he wasn't our starter. And so all of our players had to adjust to that. And we're trying to manipulate. And next year, we know that our starter is not going to be there anymore. And the new guy is the new starter. Now it's time to okay, y'all got to work around him. We understood that everybody was working out kinks year one, just like you would with a backup quarterback. I mean, Georgia had to deal with this yesterday, right?
I'm glad you brought that up because I don't know what to make of this, and I'm not sure how to put this. because I don't think anything's going to change because of a result of it. But one of the themes of this season that I look to, and it was very apparent in yesterday's Georgia Notre Dame game, is at quarterback, those Kansas State fans, they were sort of like not eager to get rid of Will Howard, but they were eager to see Avery Johnson. They were like, all right, Will Howard out. Now let's see Avery Johnson. How'd that work out, K-State? Oklahoma fans that wanted Dylan Gabriel out because they were excited about Jackson Arnold. How did that work out for Oklahoma? And how'd that work out for Dylan Gabriel in Oregon? Georgia fans. Boy, Carson Beck threw a lot of interceptions. There were Georgia fans. You can't find the Georgia fans today that last week was saying Georgia would be better with Gunnar Stockton. They were going to be better with Gunnar Stockton. Well, Carson Beck was terrible this year. We're a better team with Gunnar Stockton. Were you?
And you get into a cycle. You get into a cycle. Now look at Oklahoma. Hey, man, we got to get rid of this. I mean, Dylan Gabriel's fine, but this Jackson Arnold, this guy's a wonderkid. And you get him and you're like 2.5, 3 games in, they're like, man, we got to do anything but Jackson Arnold. And then they bring the new guy in, and they're like, okay, he's not any good either. I guess just throw Arnold out there, who, by the way, just whips our butt for no apparent reason. And then he still pretty much stinks it up the rest of the year. And then they're like, okay, we got to send him to the curb, pack in. We don't like the new guy either, the Hawkins kid. And so let's bring in John Mateer. I mean, they are in a cycle of, if it's not going to work immediately, it's not ever going to work. And I don't want to be in that either. And I think we do need to exercise some patience. So hopefully we will.
Someone who has had patience and it may work out for him is Cade Klubnik, Clemson.
Yeah.
I think for 3 years, fans, I think, have wanted to get rid of that guy. And now going to next year, maybe as a top 5 quarterback in the sport.
Hey, let me tell you something. We got to get to break, but think about this. I'm not so sure Clemson hosting LSU as the first game next year isn't the biggest game on the schedule. Ohio State, Texas, big. Alabama, FSU, super interesting. Maybe not big because FSU hadn't paid a drop in a while. But you tell me that
Klubnik versus Nussmeier.
Garrett Nussmeier
versus Klubnik.
Going to the two Death Valleys.
There'll be a ton of NFL scouts watching that game because of Klubnik and Nussmeier.
All right, time to talk a little FanDuel NFL playoffs, man. They're right here. They're almost here. But it's not too late to get in on a regular season action either, which still continues this week with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can finish the season strong with 250 smacks and bonus bets if you just bet a $5. Oh, you got to win it. I'm sorry. I'm reading this now. I've been reading it wrong. But I'm going to tell you again, 250 smacks and bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. At first, I was like, oh, my God, if you just bet it, no, you got to win it, which seems fair. FanDuel has so many ways for you to pick up a dub. I like to bet on which players will score a touchdown. You can also bet on yards and things like that. There's so many things you can bet on with FanDuel, and it's so much fun. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your chance at $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Make every moment more. FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Okay, so Milroe's gone. Jahad Campbell's gone. I think this is the right call. We'd love him. Go be a man. Go be super. Go make a bunch of money. Go be put on that wall of, built by Bama dudes and all the rooms and all that stuff. Also, Tyler Booker's gone. Same thing. Here's my hope that just one of those 3 gets taken in the first round to keep Alabama's first round streak going. We've already broken the 10-game streak. I don't want to break this streak too. So let's keep that going.
And that all 3 could go in the first round, or none of them.
Or I know that is so.
Or none.
Isn't that so symbolic of this year?
Yeah, it really is.
We could beat anybody, and we could dang near lose to anybody.
Almost felt like this past season, the potential outcomes in retrospect was this team was going to go 12-0 or 9-3.
Yeah. And we did the latter. Well, we didn't even do the latter. We went 9-4.
No, 4. We threw in an extra loss at the end.
All right. So, Tim Keenan, vaguely put something out that everybody's like, not sure. It's like that Joker meme, not sure if serious. I don't know what you're saying. I don't know if you're leaving. I don't know if you're staying. I don't know what's happening.
Yeah. And here's the thing about that is I think, and picking my words carefully here, I think it would be our biggest blow. This would be a blow. And that's because Jalen Milroe leaving was expected. I've been telling you guys since August, Jalen Milroe was only going to play this one more season. And that wasn't because that was a hope or a wish or a guess. I mean, I sort of knew Jalen Milroe was leaving after this season. This was going to be his final season. Tyler Booker and Jahad Campbell leaving 100% expected. And okay, everybody gets that. That's fine. Tim Keenan leaving is a blow. Now, I'm not saying Keenan's as good as those other guys. I'm just saying it'd be a little unexpected. I don't know that it would be a great decision on his part, and replacing him.
We don't know who the backup is. That's the biggest point. Like, I'm excited about whoever's going to take over at quarterback. I am. I'm a little nervous, but if you're not nervous, you're not paying attention. I feel good about whoever's going to take Tyler Booker's spot. I love Tyler Booker. He's a king of gum. I appreciate it.
Could be Michael Carroll, who's
it could be Michael Carroll, who's pretty awesome.
Practically a 6-star.
And Jahad Campbell, while again, I wish him nothing but the best, and I think he can make a bunch of money in the pros. I'm also not going to pretend he's in the same league as a CJ Mosley or a Dante Hightower. I think he's good. I don't think he's that. But that's like saying, well, he's no Tom Brady. Well, who the heck is Tom Brady? So,
we'd still have, they went and got the Colorado transfer, who's an all-conference player in the Big 12, Nakai Greenhill, and Justin Jefferson coming back, which is a surprise. But with Nakai Greenhill, Justin Jefferson, and potentially Deontay Lawson coming back, you got to feel pretty good about inside linebacker.
I feel good, but I don't know.
Okay, but with Tim Keenan,
I don't know who's going to take that spot, who can do that role.
It would it would probably be Edric Hill, but he's unproven to say the least.
Not even unproven. We haven't seen enough to even get excited about yet. Right. That's my thing. Correct. Like, I've seen enough Keelan Russell. Like, if you just told me Keelan Russell is going to be the starter, I'd be like, it's nervous, but I can live with it. If you told me, get the two linebackers you just mentioned, or they're like, okay, I'm down with those. Yeah, I don't think either one of them is as good as Jahad Campbell. I think both of them out there can do the job of Jahad Campbell. I don't think they will give us this splashy plays, but I think they're good enough. And same thing with Michael Carroll. I think Michael Carroll is a wonderkind, for real. I've used that term twice in this podcast, and that's stupid because I'm not even German. I don't. Edric Hill, okay. Yeah, I can't be excited about him yet because I know nothing.
Who played several snaps, almost surprisingly, in the bowl game was Jeremiah Beaman. I don't think that had anything to do with Keenan, but Beaman played inside in this game. And, of course, it doesn't count, so it doesn't affect redshirt or anything like that. But I just remember seeing 92 out there kind of early and was like, wow, that's new and good. I mean, I think they're pretty high on Beaman, and he's a guy that can play. And obviously James Smith is likely to develop into a star player next year at Alabama, and that's exciting. But no, losing Keenan would be a blow if they do. And again, I thought his post was vague. I didn't jump to, oh gosh, he's out like so many others did. But it is very possible that he is. And if he does, in my mind, Luke, you'd have to go to the portal. You'd have to. And probably the spring portal is where you're more likely to get a better. I mean, at this point, we're kind of so late in the portal process. You probably end up in the spring portal looking for one, if not two, pure defensive tackles, in the portal. I would see that as kind of the only option.
And he could, and again, I'm not faulting him for this. This is the new game. He could be posturing for some NIL bump, right?
Yes.
I'm not mad at him. I'm just telling you what it could be.
Yeah. We're really naive if we don't believe that that's a thing, and we know that it's a thing. And really, with agents now, the kid doesn't. Agents, they, all these kids have agents, and these agents are generally, the funny thing is, so many of them have bad reputations. Most of them are fine and good and do a good job for their clients. Now, keep in mind, these agents aren't agents of Alabama; they're agents of the players, and it's their job to get the best deal possible for their player. That's them doing their job. So, this happens.
Amari Jefferson's in the portal. Ja'Shawn Ross is in the portal. These are two guys that I really liked that I also cannot say I'm devastated. I mean, this is
promising young player.
Promising in one sense that we liked where they were ranked and we liked their highlights. These weren't former 5 stars. And Ja'Shawn Ross was a guy that came in late. I mean, he was going to go to Washington, I think, right? And then he
it's Noah Carter.
It's Noah Carter. Ja'Shawn Ross is from Missouri, right?
Kansas City, Missouri. And,
yeah, I'm sorry.
He committed to the Saban group. He committed to the Saban class. And he's good. Now, he was behind Noah Carter.
Yeah.
You know, they're in the same class. And see, that's probably why he left, right? I mean, he's in the same class as someone else in the outside linebacker room, and Noah Carter was a little ahead of him, played in more games. Ja'Shawn Ross only played in the Mercer game. That was the only game he played in. Amari Jefferson was the only scholarship player who was healthy who did not play in a game all year. He was the only one who didn't play.
Okay.
So
that's a message. Whether intentionally or unintentionally, it's a message.
Correct. Well, it's certainly something that I'm sure he heard loud and clear, whether it was intentional or not. And here's the thing. Both of these guys are so young. They were freshmen who were redshirting. So they're very young, and I think they have promising futures. To me, it's more of a statement of where we're at in college football right now. So Alabama, I'm sure, would have liked the privilege of continuing to develop those guys, because not everybody can just play college football right off the bus. It's actually the rare kid that can. But you know, it's just upsetting that you work on developing these kids for a year, and now they're closer to playing, and they'll be with someone else. Looks like Amari Jefferson, by the way, is going home to Tennessee, which was kind of the runner-up for him in recruiting. It'd be interesting to see if he also plays baseball there. Baseball was always a thing with Amari, and I don't believe he was going to play baseball at Alabama. So we'll see what happens up in Knoxville. That may have been a factor.
Rocket Money. We appreciate their sponsorship so much. And did Rocket Money help you find any subscriptions you forgot about so far, or that you were paying for twice? That definitely has happened to Jimmy and me. We've had a few subscriptions that we didn't even know about because I have so many kids. I think Jimmy's paying for some of them. And Rocket Money made it so easy to track them all down. It's like having a personal assistant for your finances. For me, the best feature is a subscription tracker. I've used it to cancel services I wasn't using anymore, and I've already saved a ton. Plus, with their goals feature, I've been able to automatically set aside money for my future. No more stressing about budgeting every month for old daddy. And I got to quit calling myself that. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon. rocketmoney.com/lockedon. Okay, we got to talk about the CFP a little bit, even though obviously Alabama not in it. But so Georgia loses to Notre Dame yesterday, and they lose with Gunnar Stockton at quarterback, just as you say, be careful what you wish for. The one thing that stood out to me most of all was the number of narratives that have now come out since the quarterfinals have been. At first, everybody, I mean, I've seen, who's that? Brandon Walker, I think it is, with Barstool or whatever. He said, yeah, it's just so funny to me. Now everybody's caught up because NIL, because now they can pay players like the SEC or something. And I'm like, I don't think that's really right. Because, I mean, first of all, I mean, that's an accusation that'll never be whatever. But everybody was kind of doing it. That's also an accusation, but I also agree everybody was paying players. And, yeah, some people are paying even more now, like Ohio State. Some people have said that it's all about, you know, the guys that have stuck around with programs that have helped so much, because Notre Dame's got a bunch of guys and Penn State's got a bunch of guys that have been in the program for a while. That's true, but Notre Dame also has a lot of transfer guys.
Even the quarterback.
And Ohio State has a ton of transfer guys. But they also have some guys like Jack Sawyer who've been in the program for a while. The bottom line is, if you got better players just about from wherever, and if you can develop some chemistry and you get a couple of bounces go your way, you're always going to be in there. Now, Ohio State and Alabama and probably LSU and Georgia and Notre Dame. They're always going to have the upper hand for the most part. But yes, they can be beaten. Yes, they can be shut out of the playoffs. But all this, people are saying the playing field's so level. Well, the Final Four is Notre Dame, Penn State, Texas, and Ohio State. Those are 4 of the top 10 biggest brands in college football.
Blue Bloods. Really? Blue Bloods?
Those would all qualify for Blue Bloods. I mean, obviously Alabama would be in there, Oklahoma, probably USC, whatever. But those 4 that are in the semifinals are all Blue Bloods. It hadn't really evened out anything. And in fact, if we were seeding this thing correctly, I'm not sure Boise State would have made it past the first round either. Or who was the other one that got in there who's I can't even remember anymore. Not SMU, but not Clemson. Gosh, who am I missing, Jimmy? Who was the 4 seed?
The 4 seed was Arizona State.
Arizona State. I mean, Arizona State probably wouldn't have made it out of the first round. They might have. But let's also be honest. I went to that game and I loved it. I had a good time at that game. But Texas was up 17-3, and they sort of started. You could see they were already looking ahead.
Texas is the better team. I mean, I give Arizona State a ton of credit.
Me too.
Texas is the better team, and the better team ended up, winning the game. I think Arizona State sort of out. They bought their own guts to quote Dabo Swinney from a few years ago. Look, I think here's the flaw of what's going on. We thought at the beginning was inclusion. Y'all included the wrong teams. You put in SMU and you put in Indiana when you should have put in these SEC teams. Maybe that was wrong. Maybe. But here's what I know they got wrong, and that's the way the thing is seeded. And I think Oregon's not in the Final Four because of the way this thing was seeded and the way it played out. Oregon should have been the number 1 seed and not played Ohio State, right out of the gate. Penn State was the 5th seed and they get Boise and Arizona's. I mean, Penn State got a pretty good, a run here. Texas gets into the semifinals by beating Arizona State. I think the way they seeded it is worse than how they populated the field. Even though I was complaining about how they populated the field loudly, I think the way they seeded it is actually the real flaw. And hey, these SEC teams that underachieved, that's on the coaches of those teams. And it's another theme of 2024, by the way, Luke, is as good as Notre Dame was, they lost to Northern Illinois. As good as Ohio State looks right now, they lost to Michigan.
Yeah, Northern Illinois had a good tweet after Notre Dame won. They said, "Way to go, little brother." It's kind of funny. I mean, look, and hey, I doubted Notre Dame, but let's also say this: Notre Dame's gotten a pretty good draw. I mean, they play. That's another thing. Because Dave Portnoy said the SEC is dead, and I'm like, that. By the way, Notre Dame played Georgia with their backup quarterback. I mean, that should count for something. I mean, you can't just – now, I know there'll be people out there going, oh, I thought the SEC was so good you could play with anybody. Well, when you get into these situations, it is a little tougher. And so let's also just – Notre Dame's probably a little better than we thought. And, yeah, Georgia's probably a little worse than we thought. But if Carson Beck is in there, I feel like Georgia has a much better chance to win that ball game, even though everybody has said Carson Beck isn't what we thought. True. But if Carson Beck is in there as the starter who's been in these situations, I feel like Georgia probably at least has a much better shot to win that game. And here's the other thing. Notre Dame returned the kickoff all the way, and Georgia kind of oddly went for more points with 38 seconds left to go in the second quarter, which led to a strip sack to give Notre Dame, or it's 6-3 at the half. You know what I mean?
Yeah, Georgia statistically sort of beat Notre Dame in many ways. Georgia had Georgia to me looked like the better team at certain points of the game, but I really think the biggest difference to me was that Gunnar Stockton was out and they didn't have Carson Beck, and we could say it's just a hypothetical if Carson Beck had played, who would have won the game. I don't want to take away from what Notre Dame did at all, because they're a really good team. I thought going in they were really good. They had one of these low strength of schedule things too that I bought up a lot, but I never once thought Notre Dame wasn't good. I thought Notre Dame was a good team, and Nicole Auerbach made this point, and I disagree with her about a lot of things about the playoff, but she does make this one good point. Just because you've played a low strength of schedule, that doesn't mean you're not good.
Yeah.
I mean, that doesn't mean, the Kansas City Chiefs could play the MAC and win all the games, and you're like, yeah, they didn't beat anybody. Well, the Chiefs are good.
Okay, and I agree with what you're saying. And by the way, I find Nicole Auerbach, I want to like her, and I find her just insufferable because she is so, champion for the little guy kind of thing. And I'm like, to the point where she almost hates on the big guys, which I just don't like.
But, just illogical.
But see, everybody loves to bring up that football, the NFL thing about, the Chiefs, and you're right. But see, the Chiefs will never have an opportunity to play an awful schedule. If you look at NFL strength of schedule, somebody showed me a graphic. Like, yeah, one schedule may be tougher than another, but the gap is like this. In college football, the gap is like big time because somebody plays one decent team and a bunch of bunk, and then one other team plays pretty good, pretty good, pretty good, pretty good, really good, very bad, pretty good, pretty good, pretty good. And that's where the difference is.
Teams
and they're
within their own
133 teams.
conferences. Within your own conference, you play a disparate schedule. You can't compare Texas's schedule to Georgia's, and they play in the same league. It's just 134 teams with 134 different schedules. It's nothing at all like the NFL. And too many people make it out to be that all these conferences are the same. I will admit that the SEC had a bad year. The SEC was down. The SEC disappointed.
Big time.
I would still like to ask all these people, Dave Portnoy, who says the SEC is dead. Okay, then who is the best conference? Then who is? I suppose they're going to say the Big Ten. I do agree that the Big Ten is better than I thought. The SEC is worse than I thought. I don't believe, as we sit here, that the Big Ten 1 through 18 is better than the SEC 1 through 16. I think it's closer than I would like to admit, but it's not better. The SEC is still, as we speak, the best conference, and the NFL is going to validate that by drafting more SEC players than any other conference's players in just 3 months.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that. And so, look, by the way, SEC basketball gets started this Saturday. I've got a thing to do Saturday night, so we won't be going live after the game. Alabama plays at 5, but hopefully we'll get to do if we don't do one Saturday sometime, we'll do it Sunday morning and talk about all the SEC. It's a bunch of good games Saturday, and it's going to be a lot of fun. But until next time, everybody, roll Tide.
Roll Tide.